Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome an accomplished entrepreneur from the world of health and wellness, a fellow member of the YPO from San Francisco, USA, Sami Inkinen. Sami, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. Very excited.
Thank you. Sami is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Virta Health, which is the pioneer in reversing diseases like obesity and type 2 diabetes through a nutrition-first approach. Sami also, which is very unusual and a first for me amongst all my guests, has rowed across the Pacific Ocean 2,750 miles unsupported from California to Hawaii. And as I mentioned, he's a fellow member of the YPO. So Sami, before we talk about Virta, tell me about your own amazing journey in brief.
Yeah, well, thank you again so much for having me here. Yeah, I would say I'm a very unexpected and surprising healthcare entrepreneur. As you mentioned, right now I'm on a mission to reverse diabetes and obesity in 1 billion people globally through Virta Health, through technology and nutrition. But how I ended up here, very, very briefly, actually grew up in Finland on a farm, and parents were sort of blue-collar workers. So I learned the value of hard manual labor very, very early. So picking potatoes on a farm and so forth. So I grew up on a farm, got into physics early, so I was pretty good at math, and I think that kind of pulled me out of the farm. So I did masters in physics back in Finland as a degree, and nothing to do with healthcare. My first real job was in a nuclear power plant. So I was a radio chemist in a nuclear power plant in Finland. Then kind of entrepreneurship pulled me in. I started one software company in Europe, after which worked for McKinsey a little bit, and then I came to America, where here I've been for the last 21 years. So came to America 2003, and prior to Virta Health, I started another technology company called Trulia, which went public 2012 on New York Stock Exchange, and then merged with Zillow Group, which is now the owner of Trulia. So that's a little bit about my background, and then for the last decade building this health tech company. And then finally, I think the most proudest accomplishment of my life is that I'm a father of 2 little girls. So I would say, despite all these professional things, being a parent and raising children is probably the best thing.
Absolutely. I'm much older than you, and as we were talking before, but, I've got 2 grown-up boys, and I've got a 2-year-old granddaughter, and she's the pride of our life. They live in Singapore.
Beautiful.
So, Sami, now let's talk about Virta Health and type 2 diabetes. What inspired you to focus on reversing type 2 diabetes instead of managing it like most traditional approaches?
Yeah, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up studying physics and then computers, and started an internet company before Virta. So nothing to do with healthcare. And if you had asked me, let's say 15 years ago, let's go and solve diabetes and obesity, let's go and reverse type 2 diabetes and obesity, quite frankly, I would have rolled my eyes and said, are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. You can't do that. You can't do that. These are diseases of people eating too much. And how do you solve willpower? How do you bottle willpower? You can't do that. So that would have been my thinking, say 2010. And so how did all that change? It was really, for better or worse, a personal experience. So throughout those years that I was building my previous company, Truly, I did a lot of sports too. Completed the Hawaii Ironman, triathlon world championships 7 times. I won the world championships in my age group. So I was very, very fit. And despite all that, I discovered that I myself was on my way to type 2 diabetes, and I was already pre-diabetic. And so that kind of stopped me, and I started asking questions. What the heck? Maybe it's not about willpower. Maybe it's about what you eat, not how much you eat. And long story short, I'm not a scientific mind behind Virta Health, but I met a couple of scientists, particularly Dr. Stephen Finney, who had done research in this area for several decades. And he said, you know what? Type 2 diabetes is actually a reversible disease. I published, multiple papers, some published in New England Journal of Medicine, showing that you can use nutrition to not just improve, but fundamentally reverse type 2 diabetes and get people off of insulin. And I became convinced that the science is there. Conventional wisdom is that we are looking at type 2 diabetes as a sort of a one-way street that leads into amputations and early death, but it is a reversible disease. And I kind of got excited and both frustrated, said, hey, there's a better way. Let's go and scale this nutrition treatment with technology. And here we are about a decade later.
Yeah, amazing. And I'm diabetic as well, so therefore, I'm looking forward to learning something from you in our conversation and following up later on with you. But Sami, tell me, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about type 2 diabetes that your model challenges?
Yeah, well, I'll start from the sort of the tip of the pyramid, top of the hierarchy. Conventional wisdom that's actually wrong, and we've shown is wrong. So a couple of things. Number one is just the basics that many people still think type 2 diabetes is not reversible. It's a chronic progressive disease. That is not true. We've shown published peer-reviewed results, helped hundreds of thousands of people. So that's one that's wrong. Second one is, if you assume and if you believe, which is true, that you can use nutrition to reverse this disease, there's a belief that it's only possible for 1% or 0.1% of people who have crazy willpower and can lift mountains. That's not true. Why is that not true? Because it's possible to use nutrition to eliminate hunger and cravings. And therefore, you can eat to satiety and still not just improve, but reverse type 2 diabetes. So I think that's the second one. And then the third one is just a misconception that with pharmaceuticals, so hypoglycemic drugs like insulin and many others, when you lower blood sugar, that's somehow curing or eliminating the disease. It is not. It's just slowing down the progression of the disease. And the light at the end of a tunnel is more like a train as opposed to sunshine if you're just managing the disease. So those are some of the big misconceptions that I think we've now shown that it's not quite true, and you can actually reverse the disease nutritionally.
Very well said. Thank you. And how does your nutritional biochemistry, or Virta's nutritional biochemistry, differ from standard dietary recommendations for diabetes management?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's two concepts or features, if you will, that are needed to reverse type 2 diabetes. One is the nutrition science, and then the second one is, even with the best science, it doesn't work unless people follow. So how do you support the patients? And we use obviously technology and doctors and coaches and telemedicine to do that. But let's focus on the first part, which is what you were asking on the nutritional side. So there's a couple of things. Number one, and I always start with this, is highly individualized. There's no such thing as one size fits all. Let's say you are vegetarian by choice or lifestyle or religion or whatnot. We can't tell you to eat bacon and eggs for breakfast. You would laugh and run to the hills immediately. So one piece is high degree of individualization. Second piece is, meaning not one size fits all. Second piece is, again, anything that's nutrition related cannot be a willpower exercise. So you have to be able to allow and coach your patients to eat to satiety so that you feel fulfilled. Again, that's very different from what basically all diet and exercise programs are about, which is count your calories, count your points, and be hungry most of the time. Willpower runs out latest at the wedding photo. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And then the third piece, which is a critical part of the Virta science, is if you're insulin resistant, if you have type 2 diabetes, you have to reduce your carbohydrate and sugar intake. And sugar obviously is a carbohydrate. You have to reduce it. If you don't do that, you aren't going to see the improvements in insulin resistance. And many of the nutrition guidelines still today are for people with diabetes is, eat carbohydrates in all 3, 4, 5 of your meals. So guess what? The second you eat carbohydrates, it turns into glucose in your blood glucose. And that is exactly what you want to avoid if you have type 2 diabetes. So those are some of the key, I'd say the 3 key points in how we use nutrition to sustainably reverse diabetes and help people lose weight.
Very well said. And when I was preparing for my conversation with you and reading about you and Virta, I was fascinated to read about the role of continuous remote monitoring. Tell me a little bit more about the role of continuous remote monitoring in your care model.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, earlier I mentioned that there's 2 elements to achieve diabetes reversal and sustained weight loss. One is the nutrition science, nutrition protocol, but that alone isn't enough. If one cannot follow successfully the protocol, it is completely useless. So the second piece is, how do we support, how do we individualize, how do we help our patients to actually stay on track? And that's what the continuous remote care enables. And I'll give you a specific example. In traditional care, you might go and see your doctor, your primary care, your GP, let's say 3, 4, 5 times a year, right? You go and see, they say, hey, you kind of gain a little weight, your blood sugar's up. Here's some guidance what to do and how to change your diet. Well, you go on your way, maybe for 2, 3 days, you try to follow. And then 2 months later or 3 months later, you go and see your primary care doctor and you've completely forgotten what you were supposed to do, or maybe you're off the track. Well, what does continuous remote care enable through technology and telemedicine? We basically track your biomarkers multiple times, not per year, but per day. So per day. So we can create a very tight feedback loop. It's almost like trying to build a self-driving car. You can make sure that the car is between the white and the yellow lines every single second. You don't sample once an hour, because within the next minute the car would be off the road, right?
Yeah.
So with continuous remote care, we give you tools to track your biomarkers remotely, and then we upload automatically to the cloud, and our doctors, providers, and coaches can see whether you're kind of off the track on a nearly hour-by-hour basis. And then we can adjust. We can either reach out to you and say, hey, something seems a little off. Let's talk about it. Or we can say, hey, maybe you had too much of that or too little of that, and then adjust. So the basic idea is that we can nearly on an hour-by-hour basis keep you on track, as opposed to you seeing your doctor 3, 4 times a year and then getting completely off the track within those weeks and months between the visits.
The other aspect I wanted to get your perspective on was how sustainable are a lot of these procedures. I mean, I've tried one myself where for 1 year we went off carbs and, did my portion control, et cetera, and, my HbA1c came down. And after 1 year, I decided to, roll back slightly, because you can't live like that. And things started climbing again. How does Virta's plan work?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because almost anything can work for 3 months. And again, I use this wedding photo as an example. There's a lot of people like, oh, my wedding's coming up. I want to be fit and I want to lose a couple of pounds. Any nutrition approach, and I'm not joking, any nutrition approach can help you to maybe even control your blood sugar, but certainly to lose weight for 3 months. What's the problem? If it's not sustainable, it is completely useless, other than the wedding photo where you can smile and say, hey, I lost 6 kilos or whatever, 15 pounds. So to your point, or to your question, sustainability is a key thing we focus on from day one. And there's a couple of elements to that. One is obviously you cannot be restricting yourself. So again, the approach and science we use allows you to eat to satiety. In fact, sometimes we have to coach our patients to say, hey, don't try to restrict. You're supposed to leave, the lunch table or dinner table feeling okay, satiety, no restrictions. So that's one thing. Second one is starting early, or latest after 3 or 6 months after someone has reversed their diabetes, got enough of insulin and so forth. We adjust the nutrition protocol so that it feels sustainable. So I'll give you an example. Maybe someone who's very insulin resistant, they can't really have many fruits, if any fruits, in the beginning. Now that may not be sustainable for someone else. I love fruits, I love berries. So then we start introducing food items that one might feel like, okay, well, if I can have those, I can see this being my lifestyle for the next decade or two. So introducing food items that make you feel like, okay, I'm getting the food I want. So that's another example of making things sustainable. But you're absolutely right. Without sustainability, a nutrition protocol is kind of useless. And we've tracked, formally we've tracked 5 years, out to 5 years, and we published results and sustainability results up to 5 years and been very successful at that. But it's not easy. It absolutely isn't easy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely right. And what a great response. My next question is, how does your approach to diabetes reversal impact healthcare costs for patients and providers?
Yeah, well, the punchline is we save a lot of money, and that's kind of the reason why we've been quite successful, I should say,
Absolutely.
very successful so far as a business. And the economic model that we use, particularly in America, is that we go to the payers. In America, it's health insurance companies and self-insured employers and some government entities like the Veterans Administration in America. And our value proposition for them is not just that we're going to make someone healthy, we're going to reverse their type 2 diabetes, which obviously is the number one goal and why I co-founded the company. But for the payers, obviously, let's face it, it's dollars and cents at the end of the day. So what we have to show and have shown is that when we reverse type 2 diabetes and eliminate the need for diabetes medication, such as insulin, which is insanely expensive in America, we save on average of about $6,000 of gross savings per patient per year, so about $500 a month. And about 40-50% of that, so about half, is just medication elimination. So it saves a lot of money. And I oftentimes say, at least in America, there's been a big debate, like the insulin cost, insulin prices are very high. And I say, you know what's better than a lower insulin price? Completely eliminating the need for insulin, which is possible in type 2 diabetes context. So yeah, that is our value proposition. And obviously eliminating a chronic disease makes a lot of economic sense.
One more question relating to Virta, and then I want to move to your adventure across the Pacific Ocean. Can you share a success story of a Virta patient, no names, of course, that particularly moved you?
Yeah, well, first I would say it's a little bit like I have 2 children. So choosing my favorite children, it is tough. And I truly mean that, because I'll give you an example. Every Monday we have our all company, all hands. It's like a 30-40 minute meeting, and 100% of the time, for the first 5 to 10 minutes, we actually have one of our patients dials in to this meeting and shares their story. So every Monday, we hear a story. So all of them are moving. Every one of our board meetings, so board of directors meeting, it starts with one of our patients comes in. And the reason for that is we want to remind ourselves, like, despite the technology and AI and all the cool stuff and talk about money and finances and P&L, at the end of the day, it's the patients that we exist for. So there's a lot of stories, but I'll just mention one. And I can mention his name because he has shared some of his stories publicly. It's a gentleman in Alabama. Michael is his first name. And he's a relatively young guy, actually, but he was a couple of 100 pounds, so about 100 kilos overweight, diabetic, on half a dozen medications. And now he's more than 200 pounds, so nearly 100 kilos. Weight loss. He just ran his first 5-kilometer race. When previously, he could barely get out of his house. He's eliminated all his medications. And these are all numbers, like lots of weight loss and medication, which is phenomenal. But listening to him, it's all about getting his life back. Like literally in your 30s, 40s, 50s, many of our patients talk about getting their life back. Like getting their life back. And that really warms my heart to just think about, hey, you get your life back in your middle age, and you still have another 30, 40, 50 years to go. So that's beautiful to me.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing this. So, Sami, now let's talk about your adventure and you mentioned a few minutes back that you are a sports person and have done a lot of different kinds of sports. What motivated you and your wife, Meredith, to undertake the challenge of rowing across the Pacific Ocean, or 2,750 miles from California to Hawaii?
Yeah, well, first of all, anyone listening there, like, well, that's crazy. I agree. It's a little crazy. And just a couple of things before the motivation. It took 45 days and 3 hours. So for 45 days and 3 hours, we were in a tiny rowboat, completely unsupported with my wife, who still about 10 years later is my wife. So I guess we were successful with the row. So it is a little insane to be quite honest. But so what was driving? It's one, the primary idea came from Laura Hillebrand's book Unbroken, and I would highly recommend. A very inspiring story. And there's a World War Air Force veteran get shot down on the middle of the Pacific, and they flow through the Pacific Ocean in a life raft. So this may sound like, how is that related to the row? But the description in the book of that adventure, where luckily this gentleman, Louis Zamperini, survived, and it's kind of a story of forgiveness, inspired me. I said, hey, I'd love to experience the wilderness of Pacific Ocean in a very kind of hands-on way. So that was one piece of it. And then the second piece, which was a huge part of it, was almost like a stepping stone to co-founding Virta Health, which is that we wanted to do this row demonstrating and inspiring particular kids that you don't need sugar, sports products, things like Gatorade for a little exercise. In fact, we wanted to show that you can exercise 16 hours a day, which we did for 45 days nonstop, with absolutely no sugar at all, and still break a world record, which we did. And then we raised awareness and money for a couple of nonprofits who are basically fighting the good food fight. And that was kind of the cause, besides our own little adventure with my wife.
Amazing. So time for two more questions for you.
Okay.
How did you prepare physically and, more importantly, mentally for such a grueling journey?
Yeah, that is a good question, and maybe there's some life lessons too. Physically, quite frankly, it was pretty straightforward. Obviously, I and my wife had a pretty good sort of healthy sports background, and we were reasonably fit. But we really went in 6 months from zero to being able to row across the Pacific Ocean. It's not a lot of time. 6 months, and neither one of us had much rowing experience, and it was really a combination of two things. One, unsurprisingly, row quite a bit, both on an erg and then on a rowboat, hours and hours and hours. And then the second one was lots of weightlifting, and that was a key part, because when you're rowing and fighting big waves in the Pacific Ocean, there's a lot of kind of twisting, particularly your upper body. So we wanted to make sure that, you know, we are strong and durable for many hours and days and weeks, and in fact almost two months of rowing. So that was the physical, which honestly was fun and was probably easier than one might think. Mentally, it's a whole different thing. I am a huge fan of meditation and observing and realizing that the mind has a life of its own, and trying to tame the mind and kind of embrace the pain and difficulty. So meditation was one, and then the second one was, we actually spent quite a bit of time with my wife to read and practice how do we navigate hardship as two individuals. You know, you are in an enclosed space like a robot, you can't escape, and inevitably kind of frustrations and pain and cold and all kinds of things would come up. So we actually practiced nonviolent communications and other tools, like how do we handle, because there's no way out. You can't say slam the door and
you can't have an argument.
So yeah, quite a bit. And then at the end of the day, you just kind of, you go with the flow once you're there.
Absolutely. And my last question, and this is for the many people who will listen to our conversation: how do you apply the lessons from your rowing challenge to your work at Virta Health?
Good question. Well, maybe I'll highlight two things. First one is a mantra that I kind of crystallized for myself during the row, which is get uncomfortable. Get uncomfortable. And what that means is I realized during the row that as we had to take about 1 million oar strokes from California to Hawaii to cross,
Okay.
none of those oar strokes felt comfortable. It wasn't like, hot chocolate and marshmallows, and it was uncomfortable, a little pain in the back, and it was just uncomfortable. But I realized that while doing that, it was incredibly gratifying experience because we had a course behind the role, helping kids realize what's healthy nutrition. So that's, and I remind myself with work, a lot of the things you have to do as an entrepreneur, it's physically and or mentally hard, but there's beauty in that if you can embrace that and realize that, I'm in a privileged position to try to create something that makes other people's lives easier. So that's one piece, this get uncomfortable. And when you feel uncomfortable, you realize that that's actually a beautiful place to be, especially when you're using it to help other people. That's one. And then I think the second lesson is just focus on a journey. And when you're rowing there for 45 days, if you're thinking about the destination and the first hot shower and first night of sleep in your bed, you are going to become miserable because you might think, oh, it's 2 weeks away, and then suddenly it's 5 weeks away. So you have to find joy from the every second, every hour, every day, the process and the journey, because you never know when, if ever, you'll reach the destination. So focus on the journey. And again, these are cliches, easy words to say, but when you experience it, you get it into your bone marrow, right?
Correct. But each one of these may sound easy, but when it is taken in the context of what you have just achieved, then they become very valuable. But on that note, and your two wonderful lessons, get uncomfortable. And I'm amazed you actually had an idea that is going to be 1 million oar strokes. That itself tells you the amount of detail work that both of you must have done for this journey. And the second you said was focus on the journey. And I'm just adding 1 day at a time, because you never know what's coming for you next day. That's also a way of expressing gratitude every morning with saying, thank God I'm alive in the morning today. Thank you, Sami, for speaking to me about your own incredible journey from Finland and all the amazing stuff you did before you founded Virta Health. Thank you for talking to me at such length about so many different aspects of diabetes too. And I completely agree, it is reversible, or if not reversible, it is manageable, depending on how much willpower you have. And as you said so rightly, how much carbohydrates you have. Thank you also for talking to me about some amazing stories of individuals who have gained so much from all the work that you have done with them. And finally, thank you for telling me about your rowing expedition with your wife, 2,750 miles from California to Hawaii. Thank you again, and good luck to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.